millionaire widower, followed his nanny after work. What he discovered changed everything. The autumn evening air carried a crisp chill as 37-year-old Alexander Sterling stood at his office window, watching the city lights begin to twinkle to life below. His reflection in the glass showed a man who wore success well, dark hair perfectly styled, a tailored charcoal suit that spoke of wealth and position, and the kind of confident bearing that came from years of making decisions that affected thousands of employees. But tonight, Alexander's thoughts weren't on quarterly reports or board meetings. They were on the conversation he'd overheard that morning between his 7-year-old daughter Sophie and her nanny, 28-year-old Isabella Martinez. "Why don't you ever buy pretty things for yourself, Bella?" Sophie had asked with the innocent directness that only children possessed. Isabella had paused in braiding Sophie's hair, her hands gentle but practiced. "Pretty things aren't always the most important things, sweetheart. Sometimes taking care of the people we love is more beautiful than anything we could buy." The exchange had stayed with Alexander all day, gnawing at something deep in his chest. Isabella had been caring for Sophie for almost 2 years now, ever since his wife Amanda had lost her battle with cancer. In that time, she had become far more than just an employee. She had become the steady, nurturing presence that had helped both Alexander and Sophie navigate their grief. Isabella was petite with warm brown eyes and honey, blonde hair that she usually wore pulled back in a simple ponytail. Her style was understated, clean jeans, simple sweaters, and comfortable shoes that could keep up with an energetic 7-year-old. There was something graceful about the way she moved through their penthouse apartment, bringing warmth and laughter to spaces that had felt cold and empty after Amanda's death. Alexander had noticed things about Isabella over the months. The way she mended Sophie's clothes instead of simply replacing them, how she prepared simple but nutritious meals and seemed to genuinely enjoy the process. The careful way she managed the household budget he provided, never asking for more than was absolutely necessary. But it was the smaller observations that had begun to concern him. The way Isabella wore the same few outfits in rotation, how she declined his offers to order takeout for herself when she worked late, the gentle but firm way she refused any gifts or bonuses beyond her regular salary. "I'm well compensated for my work, Mr. Sterling," she would say with that soft smile that had become such a comfort to both him and Sophie. "I don't need anything more." Tonight, as Alexander watched Isabella gather her simple brown leather bag and cardigan, preparing to leave for the evening, he made an impulsive decision. Something about her earlier comment to Sophie had stirred a protective instinct he hadn't expected to feel for anyone other than his daughter. "Bella, I'm heading out anyway," he said, grabbing his tan overcoat. "Let me give you a ride home." Isabella looked surprised. In 2 years, Alexander had never offered to drive her anywhere. "That's very kind, Mr. Sterling, but I don't want to trouble you. The bus runs right to my neighborhood." "It's no trouble at all," Alexander insisted, already moving toward the door. "I insist." As they walked through the lobby of his upscale building, Alexander was struck by the contrast between his world and Isabella's quiet presence. She moved through the marble and gold opulence without seeming intimidated, but also without appearing impressed. It was as if she saw through the external trappings to something more essential underneath. In the car, their conversation was comfortable but polite. Isabella asked about his day, listened with genuine interest as he talked about a challenging negotiation, and shared funny stories about Sophie's adventures at school. But Alexander found himself paying attention to directions, rather than words, as Isabella guided him through increasingly modest neighborhoods. "You can drop me at the corner here," Isabella said as they entered a part of the city Alexander rarely visited. "Thank you so much for the ride." But Alexander's curiosity was fully aroused now. "I'd like to see you to your door, if that's all right. It's getting dark." Isabella hesitated, and Alexander caught something in her expression that looked almost like embarrassment. "Mr. Sterling, you really don't need to, please," Alexander said gently. "I'd feel better knowing you got home safely." They drove in silence for another few blocks until Isabella pointed to a small, somewhat run-down apartment building. As Alexander pulled up to the curb, he watched Isabella gather her bag and prepare to get out quickly, but something made him turn off the engine. "Isabella, wait a moment." She turned back, her brown eyes questioning. "I know this might sound strange, but would you mind if I walked you up? I'd like to understand more about your life outside of our home." Isabella's cheeks flushed slightly. Mr. Sterling, my apartment is very small, very simple. It's not what you're used to. I'm not asking to judge your home, Alexander said softly. I'm asking because I care about you as a person, not just as Sophie's nanny. Something in his tone must have convinced her, because Isabella nodded slowly. All right, but please don't feel sorry for me. I've made my choices deliberately. They climbed 3 flights of stairs in an older building that was clean, but clearly hadn't seen renovations in decades. Isabella's apartment was on the top floor, and as she unlocked the door, Alexander prepared himself for what he might find. What he discovered was something he hadn't expected. Isabella's apartment was tiny, just one main room that served as living area, kitchen and bedroom, with a small bathroom off to one side. But it wasn't the size that surprised Alexander. It was how she had transformed the space. Every surface was immaculately clean. Handmade curtains hung at the windows, sewn from fabric that was simple but chosen with care. A small bookshelf held well-worn volumes alongside photographs of what Alexander assumed were family members. Fresh flowers, simple daisies from the grocery store, sat in a mason jar on a table that had been painted a cheerful yellow. But it was the corner of the room that made Alexander's breath catch. There, carefully arranged on a small desk, were dozens of pieces of children's artwork, drawings, crafts, and handmade cards, all signed Sophie in her 7-year-old handwriting. She makes me something almost every day, Isabella said softly, noticing where Alexander's attention had focused. I couldn't bear to throw any of them away. Alexander moved closer to examine the collection. There were Mother's Day cards addressed to Dear Bella, drawings of the 3 of them together, and craft projects that Isabella had clearly helped Sophie create during their time together. She loves you very much, Alexander said, his voice thick with emotion. And I love her, Isabella replied simply. She's brought such joy to my life. Both of you have. Alexander turned to look at Isabella more closely, seeing her in her own space for the first time. Here, without the grandeur of his penthouse as a backdrop, he could see her more clearly. This was a woman who had created beauty and comfort from very little, who treasured hand-drawn pictures more than expensive art, who had made deliberate choices about what mattered in her life. Isabella, he said carefully, can I ask you something personal? She nodded, though he could see her tensing slightly. Why do you live here? I mean, I pay you well enough that you could afford something more comfortable. Isabella was quiet for a moment, moving to the small kitchenette to put on a kettle for tea. Would you like to sit down? This might take a while to explain. Alexander settled into one of 2 mismatched but comfortable chairs while Isabella prepared tea with the same careful attention she brought to everything else. The truth is, Isabella began, handing him a simple mug, most of my salary doesn't stay with me. Alexander frowned, concerned. What do you mean? Isabella sat across from him, her hands wrapped around her own mug as if seeking warmth. My mother lives in a care facility. She has early onset Alzheimer's, and the good facilities, the ones where she's treated with dignity and kindness, they're expensive. Alexander felt something shift in his chest. Isabella, why didn't you ever tell me? Because it's not your problem, she said simply. And because I was afraid you might think I was asking for more money or trying to gain sympathy. How long has she been sick? 3 years now. She was diagnosed just after I started working for families as a nanny. She was only 55. Isabella's voice remained steady, but Alexander could see the pain in her eyes. The early stages were manageable, but as it progressed, she trailed off, staring into her tea. That's why you took the job with us, Alexander realized. The salary was enough to pay for her care. Isabella nodded. Your family, you and Sophie, you've been a blessing in more ways than you know. Not just because of the job, but because taking care of Sophie, being part of your daily life, it's given me purpose during a very difficult time. Alexander set down his mug, his mind reeling with this new understanding. Isabella, the clothes, the simple meals, living here. You're sacrificing everything to take care of your mother. I'm not sacrificing anything important, Isabella said firmly. Things, possessions, they don't matter. Love matters. Family matters. Making sure someone who cared for you your whole life is treated with respect when they can no longer care for themselves. That matters. Alexander was quiet for a long moment, absorbing the full picture of Isabella's life. Here was a woman who worked 12-hour days caring for his daughter, then came home to an apartment she could barely afford, Also, she could ensure her mother received proper care. Does Sophie know? He asked finally. About my mother? Isabella shook her head. I don't want her to worry. Children shouldn't have to carry adult burdens. Alexander thought about his own daughter, how naturally she had adapted to Isabella's presence in their lives, how Isabella had helped Sophie process her grief over losing her mother, while carrying her own heavy burden of watching a parent disappear piece by piece. Isabella, he said slowly, I need to ask you something, and I want you to answer honestly. She looked at him with those warm brown eyes that had comforted his daughter through countless small crises and big emotions. Are you happy? I mean, truly happy with your life as it is? Isabella considered the question seriously. Happy is complicated. I'm content. I'm grateful for meaningful work and the ability to care for the people I love. But happy, she paused. I think I've forgotten what that feels like. The honesty of her answer hit Alexander like a physical blow. Here was a woman who had devoted herself completely to caring for others. His daughter, her mother, without reserving anything for herself. What would make you happy? He asked. Isabella smiled, but it was tinged with sadness. Small things. Being able to buy fresh flowers more than once a month. Not having to count every dollar at the grocery store. Maybe taking Sophie to do something special without worrying about the cost. She paused. But mostly, I think I'd be happy if I could stop feeling like I'm failing everyone. Like I'm not doing enough for my mother, not giving Sophie everything she deserves, not... She stopped, looking embarrassed. I'm sorry? You asked a simple question and I'm telling you my whole life story. No, Alexander said firmly. I'm glad you're telling me. I should have asked before now. They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, the warmth of the tea and the intimacy of honest conversation creating a cocoon of understanding around them. Isabella, Alexander said finally, what if things could be different? She looked at him questioningly. What if you didn't have to choose between taking care of your mother and taking care of yourself? What if you could do both, Mr. Sterling? I appreciate the thought, but life doesn't work that way. We all have to make choices about what matters most. Alexander stood up, pacing to the window that looked out over the modest neighborhood. But what if we could find another way? Over the following days, Alexander found himself thinking constantly about his evening in Isabella's apartment. The image of Sophie's artwork carefully displayed on Isabella's desk. The way Isabella had spoken about her mother with such love and devotion. The quiet dignity with which she had created a life of meaning despite difficult circumstances. He began to notice things he had somehow missed before. The way Isabella's face lit up when she talked about Sophie's achievements. How she remembered every detail of his daughter's preferences and fears. The gentle wisdom with which she guided Sophie through the normal challenges of childhood. But he also began to see the signs of stress he had been blind to. The slight shadows under Isabella's eyes that spoke of worry and sleepless nights. The way she sometimes paused in the middle of a sentence, as if her mind was elsewhere. The careful way she managed every resource as if it might be the last. Daddy, Sophie said one evening as Isabella helped her with homework at the kitchen table. Why does Bella look sad sometimes? Alexander glanced over at Isabella, who was patiently explaining a math problem to Sophie with infinite gentleness. What do you mean, sweetheart? Sometimes when she thinks I'm not looking, she gets this look. Like when Mommy used to worry about things. The observation pierced Alexander's heart. His 7-year-old daughter, with the emotional intelligence of someone who had already experienced loss, had noticed what he as an adult had missed. That night, after Isabella had left for the evening, Alexander made a decision. He picked up his phone and called his assistant. Jennifer, I need you to research care facilities for Alzheimer's patients. The best ones in the city. I don't care about cost. The next morning, Alexander asked Isabella to stay after Sophie left for school. Is everything all right? Isabella asked, settling into the living room chair where she usually helped Sophie with reading. Everything is fine, Alexander assured her. But I have something I'd like to discuss with you. He pulled out a folder he had prepared and set it on the coffee table between them. Isabella, I've been thinking about our conversation the other night, about choices and what makes a person happy. Isabella looked wary. Mr. Sterling, if this is about a raise, I've told you, it's not about a raise, Alexander interrupted gently. It's about family. He opened the folder to reveal information about Sunset Manor, the most prestigious Alzheimer's care facility in the city. This is where I'd like your mother to receive her care, he said simply. Isabella's eyes widened as she scanned the brochure. Mr. Sterling, this place, I could never afford for it, Alexander said. I am. Isabella stood up abruptly, shaking her head. No, absolutely not. I can't accept charity. It's not charity, Alexander said calmly. It's family taking care of family. We're not family, Isabella protested, though her voice lacked conviction. Alexander stood as well, moving closer to where she stood with her arms wrapped protectively around herself. Aren't we? He asked softly. Isabella, you've been more than Sophie's nanny. You've been her second mother, her comfort, her guide through the most difficult period of her young life. You've been my partner in raising her, my support when I didn't know how to help her process her grief. Tears were streaming down Isabella's face now. You're my employer. I work for you. No, Alexander said firmly. You love my daughter. You've made our house a home again. You've brought laughter and warmth back into our lives. That's not employment, that's family. Isabella sank back into the chair, overwhelmed. I don't understand what you're asking. Alexander knelt in front of her chair, taking her hands in his. I'm asking you to let me take care of you the way you've taken care of us. I'm asking you to move your mother to Sunset Manor, where she'll receive the best possible care. I'm asking you to let me give you a real salary increase, not as charity, but as recognition of your true value to our family. And in return, Isabella asked, her voice barely above a whisper, in return, you keep being exactly who you are. You keep loving Sophie the way you do. You keep bringing joy and peace to our home. And maybe, he paused, gathering courage for what he wanted to say next. Maybe you let yourself be happy again. Isabella looked into Alexander's eyes, seeing something there she hadn't expected. Not pity, not condescension, but genuine care and respect. Why? She asked simply. Alexander was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. Because love creates family, not blood or legal documents. Because I've watched you sacrifice everything for the people you care about, and it's time someone cared about you that way. Because Sophie deserves to see what it looks like when the people who love her also take care of each other. He paused, then added more softly, and because over these past 2 years, you've become important to me too, not just as Sophie's caregiver, but as a person I admire and care about deeply. Isabella felt something shift in her chest, a loosening of the tight control she'd maintained over her emotions for so long. Alexander, she said, using his first name for the first time, I don't know what to say. Say yes, he said simply. Say you'll let us be your family the way you've been ours. That afternoon, Alexander and Isabella drove to Sunset Manor together to meet with the administrator. The facility was everything Alexander had promised, spacious, bright, with gardens and common areas designed to provide dignity and comfort for residents at every stage of their condition. We can arrange for your mother to be moved here within the week, the administrator explained as they toured the memory care unit. Our staff specializes in creating individual care plans that honor each resident's history and preferences. Isabella walked through the rooms in a daze, hardly believing that such comprehensive, compassionate care could be possible for her mother. When they visited the activities room and saw residents engaged in art therapy and music programs, she finally broke down completely. She loved to paint, Isabella whispered through her tears. Before the disease, she was always painting. Watercolors of flowers and landscapes. I haven't seen her smile in months. Alexander put his arm around Isabella's shoulders, offering comfort and support. She'll smile again here, and you'll be able to visit her without worrying about anything except enjoying your time together. The move happened quickly, and Isabella's first visit to her mother at Sunset Manor was a revelation. Her mother, Maria, was confused about many things, but she responded immediately to the cheerful, patient staff and the beautiful environment. Mija, her mother said, using the Spanish endearment that had been Isabella's first word. This place is like a garden. And the ladies here, they're so kind. Isabella spent the afternoon with her mother, joining an art therapy session where Maria painted wobbly, but joyful flowers in bright yellows and oranges. For the first time in months, Isabella saw glimpses of the woman her mother had been before the disease. She's going to be happy here, Isabella told Alexander that evening as they sat in his living room, while Sophie played nearby. I can't believe the difference already. Alexander smiled, watching Isabella's face as she talked about her mother's day. The constant tension that had lived in her shoulders for months was beginning to ease, and he could see the beginnings of real peace in her expression. "There's something else I want to discuss with you," Alexander said after Sophie had gone to bed. Isabella looked at him curiously. "I've been thinking about our living situation. This penthouse is enormous, and most of it sits empty. There's a guest suite on the other side of the apartment that has its own entrance, its own kitchen. It's basically a separate apartment." Isabella's eyes widened. "Alexander, I couldn't—" "Hear me out," he said gently. "You're here 12 hours a day anyway. Sophie adores you and would love to have you closer, and frankly, I would feel better knowing you're not commuting across the city every day, especially in winter." He paused, then continued more softly. "And I think it would be good for all of us to be more of a family unit. Not employer and employee, but people who care about each other and share a life together." Isabella was quiet for a long moment, processing what Alexander was suggesting. "You're asking me to move in? To really be part of your family? I'm asking you to let yourself have a home where you're valued and cared for. I'm asking you to let Sophie have the stability of knowing her favorite person isn't going anywhere. And I'm asking myself to be brave enough to admit that our family works better when you're part of it." The move into the guest suite happened gradually over the following weeks. Isabella brought her few possessions, including Sophie's artwork and her mother's favorite books, and slowly began to make the space her own. Sophie was thrilled with the arrangement, delighting in being able to knock on Isabella's door for impromptu conversations and bedtime stories. Alexander found himself looking forward to the evenings, when the three of them would cook dinner together, Isabella teaching Sophie family recipes while Alexander contributed his limited but enthusiastic culinary skills. "This feels like a real family," Sophie announced one evening as they sat around the dining table sharing stories about their day. "Like how it was with Mommy, but different good." Alexander and Isabella exchanged a meaningful look over Sophie's head. Different good was perhaps the perfect way to describe what they had built together. Not a replacement for what had been lost, but something new and valuable in its own right. Months passed, and Alexander watched Isabella bloom in ways that took his breath away. With the burden of her mother's care lifted, and the security of a real home, she began to rediscover parts of herself that had been dormant. She started taking photography classes in her free time, something she had always wanted to do, but never had the resources for. Her pictures of Sophie and their daily life together were beautiful, capturing moments of joy and connection that Alexander treasured. She began cooking more adventurous meals, experimenting with recipes from her family's heritage, and teaching Sophie about the traditions that had shaped her own childhood. The penthouse filled with the scents of cumin and cilantro, and Sophie learned to roll tortillas and speak simple Spanish phrases. Most importantly, Isabella began to laugh again, really laugh, with the kind of abandon that comes from feeling safe and valued, and free from constant worry. One evening, as they sat on the balcony watching the sunset over the city, Sophie curled up between them reading a book. Alexander finally found the courage to say what had been growing in his heart for months. "Isabella," he said softly, "I need to tell you something." But she looked up from her own book, her brown eyes warm and attentive. "I love you," he said simply, "not just as Sophie's caregiver, not just as a member of our family, but as the woman who has brought light back into my life when I thought it would always be dark." Isabella's breath caught, and Alexander could see tears gathering in her eyes. "I know it might complicate things," he continued quickly, "and I don't want you to feel pressured or worried about your place here. Regardless of how you feel about me romantically, you and your mother will always be taken care of, and you'll always have a home with us." Isabella set down her book and turned to face him fully. "Alexander," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "I love you too. I have for months, but I was afraid to hope that someone like you could feel that way about someone like me." "Someone like you?" Alexander repeated, confused. "Isabella, you're the strongest, most compassionate, most beautiful woman I've ever known. I'm the one who should be worried about being worthy of your love." They kissed then, gently and sweetly, while Sophie continued reading between them, oblivious to the romantic moment, but surrounded by the love and security that had become the foundation of their unconventional family. They were married the following spring in a small ceremony attended by Sophie, Isabella's mother, who had a good day and remembered the significance of the occasion, and a few close friends. Isabella wore a simple but elegant dress that Alexander had insisted on buying, and Sophie served as their ring bearer with serious 7-year-old dignity. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the minister said, and Sophie cheered loudly as Alexander kissed his new bride. At the reception, held in the penthouse that had become their true home, Isabella's mother gave a toast that surprised everyone with its clarity and insight. "My daughter," Maria said, her voice carrying the authority of maternal love. "She has always taken care of everyone else. Today, I see that someone finally wants to take care of her. This is how love should be. People choosing each other every day, making each other stronger and happier." Years later, when Sophie was in high school and Isabella's photography had evolved into a successful freelance business, Alexander would often think about that autumn evening when he had followed Isabella home from work. He had expected to discover something about her living situation that would help him understand her better. Instead, he had discovered something about the nature of family itself. That love creates bonds stronger than blood. That caring for each other is a privilege rather than a burden. And that sometimes the greatest gifts come disguised as ordinary kindness. "Do you ever regret it?" Isabella asked one evening as they sat in the same balcony chairs, where they had first declared their love, watching their teenager Sophie and her friends in the living room. "Regret what?" "Following me home that night. Getting involved in my complicated life." Alexander reached for her hand, bringing it to his lips for the gentle kiss that had become their daily ritual. "Never," he said firmly. "That night I thought I was being kind to an employee. Instead, I discovered the love of my life and learned what it really means to be a family." Isabella smiled, the radiant expression that had first captured his heart and continued to light up his world every day. "Your kindness saved me," she said softly, "but your love gave me a life I never dared to dream was possible." "Our love," Alexander corrected gently, "built on mutual care, sustained by daily choice, and strengthened by the knowledge that we're better together than we ever could be apart." As the city lights twinkled around them, and their daughter's laughter echoed from inside their home, Isabella thought about the woman she had been before Alexander's kindness had changed everything. That woman had been strong and loving, but she had also been slowly breaking under the weight of carrying everyone's burdens alone. This woman, the one who shared responsibilities and joys equally with a partner who valued her completely, this woman was whole in a way she had never imagined possible. Sometimes, Isabella reflected, the greatest love stories begin not with passion but with compassion. Not with grand gestures but with simple recognition of another person's worth. And sometimes, when we're brave enough to let ourselves be cared for as much as we care for others, we discover that we've been living half a life without even knowing it. The discovery that had changed everything wasn't what Alexander found when he followed Isabella home that night. It was what they both found when they chose to see each other clearly, love each other completely, and build a family based on the revolutionary idea that everyone deserves to be cherished exactly as they are.